Alright, how are you guys doing? Welcome to my channel, and in this video we're going to make an arm, and we're going to also make a rig with some muscle deformations. We're also soon at 100 subscribers, which I actually think is cool, and if you want to see more of Blender and 3D related videos and tutorials like this one, make sure to subscribe, because I'm posting at least once a week. And if you have any other kind of feedback, don't hesitate to drop a comment. I always appreciate that. Alright, anyways, let's get to the video. I'm going to divide this video and this process into the different steps: modeling and retopology, and then we're going to bake some normal maps, and then we're going to add an armature and some bones, and then we're going to make the shape keys and link them to some drivers. Then we're going to do some texture painting, some both diffuse and some skin texture, and then we're going to do some grooming, actually some arm hair. So yeah, let's get into Blender. I'm starting with just a photo for reference in the scene, with the muscles in the arm from some different angles, just something that I found online. If you're really good at anatomy, you obviously don't need that, but I think that will help some of you guys out in the beginning while trying to make some more realistic style human body parts. Further, I just block out the biggest muscles by subdividing a cube a couple of times and applying the subdivision surface modifier. Then I can sculpt it into what I want. That's essentially my whole process for this whole arm. So as you can see, I've started with the shoulder, further gone over to the tricep muscle and the bicep muscle, using the reference a bit to make sure I'm not completely off with the proportions. I'm adding in an elbow here, and further some of the forearm muscles. They are a little bit more subtle, and you can't really see the difference between those muscles that well from the outside, so I'm going to divide the forearm into 3 meshes, as you can see here. I'm starting here one by one to apply some of the subdivision surface modifiers and giving it some more detail, but I'm waiting a little bit more to merge the geometry just for the control of it. And for example, I am dividing the shoulder muscle into the 3 deltoid parts, creating the elbow a little bit more distinct. Now I have gone over all the different parts of the arm and smoothed it out with some more details, and now I'm joining them all together with help from the union button using the bool tool add-on for Blender, which is very good for situations like this. And now I'm using the dynamic topology sculpting tool, and I'm smoothing out the edges between the different muscles part, making them look more subtle, and making unionized whole mesh. Making a normal map, you just select the high poly mesh and then the lower poly mesh, making an image texture in the material of the lower poly mesh, adding a bake map, going to the bake section of the render properties, choosing normal map and press bake. I have to admit that baking normals in Blender is not always that intuitive, but it often ends up like this, and you should select the select to active check and adjust the max ray distance to something like 0.01. However, that almost never works just by itself for me, so I have to sculpt a little bit on the original high poly mesh so that they aren't overlapping in so many places. Then I make it a little bit smaller so that the low poly lays on top of the other one, and then it should work better. I've also heard that you could try messing around with the extrusion and the cage option. When you're done, plug it into the normal map on the principled BSDF, and it should look okay. Now it's time for the next step, and we're going to add an armature. We're sticking to just a simple upper and lower arm bone, and just place it so it lines up with the mesh, and select first the mesh and then the bones. Control P and armature deform with automatic weights. And since the next step is messing around with the shape keys, we don't really have to change anything about the vertex groups. Select the armature and go into pose mode and pose the lower arm in the position you want to add the muscle deformation to. Then you go to Object Data Properties and add a shape key. The first one will say basic, but you have to add another one. Drag the value up and sculpt the mesh the way that you want it, and that's what I'm doing on screen right now. We want to activate it as we rotate the lower arm bone, in this case along the local x-axis, right? So we need to add the driver to the value, which is what we just did, and set the space to local space, the right rotation for your project, and in this case it's the X rotation, and of course object is armature and bone is just the bone you're rotating in here. And you can go to the modifiers, add modifier and add the generator. Now you can control the driver function. If you want the shape key to be activated earlier or later, change the constant for where the function crosses the y-axis, and if you want to change how fast the shape key develops, change how many x values change per y value. And it looks pretty good. I just keep modifying the muscle deformation a little bit. So also the normal map that we created earlier looked a little bit unsmooth some places, so what you can do if that happens to you is that you can go into texture painting and use the color drop tool and just paint the standard blue normal map color along some of the wonky edges, and it will smooth things out a little bit. So now the normal map also looks even better. Now I want to add some skin texture, so I'm adding just a black and white skin texture photo that I found somewhere online as texture, and select the texture as brush and choose the stencil option, so you can see the texture over the screen and paint over it. I just keep doing this all over the arm till it's covered. Here you can also make it a tileable texture in Photoshop and select tile instead of stencil, but then you also lose some of the control by doing that. Anyways, it's starting to look pretty cool now. So the image texture that you just created goes into a bump node and into the height, and the normal map from earlier goes into the normal in the bump node as well. And now I'm adding the arm hair. Make a new vertex group and go into weight paint and just paint wherever you want it to be hair. Make a new hair particle system and go into vertex group and select a new vertex group that you painted in density, so the hair will only appear in the wanted area. Then give the hair some children, more points so it looks smoother, some clumping maybe, some kink in the form of waves, and a simple black material, and you have some arm hair. Also just the grooming is very simple, so just drag it around a little bit. I also first wanted to create some hair on the upper arm, but I later changed it, so the hair just appeared on the lower part of the arm. Then at the very end it's time to paint the diffuse material. I just found some simple skin texture, and I do the exact same process as I did with the skin bump node. I add it as a texture and select it as a stencil and paint all over the place. When it's done, I plug it into color and subsurface color, and I increase the subsurface value a little bit, so it will look a little bit more like skin. And also with this project, I added a tattoo and some freckles, and you can add anything you want really with the exact same technique. If you're adding a tattoo, for example, like I do here, which is black on a white background, just make sure to select darken instead of mix in the texture paint drop down menu on top there. And yeah, now I'm adding some freckles, and it's actually pretty much done. Just make sure that you don't render too many hairs like I did here, and yeah, then it's done. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and see you next week.